So here we are again. You're back here.
Back again.
And some more questions thrown your way.
Right.
So let's start off with, have you had anything unusual, any unusual phenomena happening to you?
Wow, okay. Well, the best place to start is at the beginning. So if we start at the beginning of my journey into the unknown, I mean, I don't have a lot of memory of very early childhood, I'll be honest. So whether or not things were happening when I was tiny, when I was kind of growing up as a toddler, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. There's one story, though, and I don't think I've told this story to anyone, but tiny, very, very tiny, probably 2 or 3 years old. And we used to live in a terraced house. We were on the end terrace of a terraced house, so we had some windows in the side of the building. And I wasn't very good with my language before I went to school, obviously, because you're learning to talk before you're 4. So it's before I was 4 years old. It's probably, like I say, 2.5, 3, somewhere in that bracket. And my mum remembered this when she was still alive, and she shared it with me as a story. She said she was working in the kitchen, the back kitchen one day, and she just heard me go, "Paddock, Paddock, Paddock," and she's in the kitchen working away going, "Parrot? We flipping, we live in the north of England. You don't have parrots flying up and down the Manchester Ship Canal, because we lived opposite the Ship Canal on Ellesmere Road." And she's like, "Parrot? What do you mean parrot?" So she said she came out of the kitchen, and I can still vaguely remember this, and one of these side windows, sat on the windowsill, is an owl. And it's looking at me, and apparently I'm looking at the owl, and it's, doing what it does with its head like this, and I'm looking back at the owl, and I'm like, "Paddock, parrot," because I didn't know what it was, obviously. And she said apparently we just sort of looked at each other. I'm looking at the owl's looking at me, and it was like she wasn't there. And it went on for quite a few minutes, longer than you would expect an owl to sit there doing nothing. What on earth an owl's doing in the middle of, like, Warrington, who knows? And it just sat there and it just looked at me, and I looked at this owl, and it was like we were communicating somehow, she said. And then after a while, the owl just bailed and flew off and went. Now that's apparently, I've been told, quite significant. That kind of interaction when an owl comes to visit you. There's going to be people watching this out there. They're going to go, "Oh, wow, he was visited by an owl," because it's it is a significant occurrence. So really, that's the earliest memory of anything odd, if you like, unusual happening.
Well, with owls as well, they tend to turn up as well with the abduction cases.
They can do, and there's even owl-eyed aliens, and in archaeology you've got owl eyes that are prehistoric carvings that are known as owl-eyed. You get owl-eyed pots, owl-eyed statues, and they go back thousands and thousands of years. And then, of course, any of the craft that people follow, it's wisdom. That's what it represents, wisdom. It's that Gnosticism thing, the whole Gnostic thing that goes with the owl. So symbolically, that was important. But I also look back at that and I think, that was pretty unusual. Why that? Why then? Why there? And I think that possibly that was a turning point somehow. It was an indicator of, of what was to follow, sort of thing. So I don't have a lot of memories of sort of being sort of 5, 6 years of age. They were just, we moved house when I was 7. We moved out of Ellesmere Road and moved to the house we're in now, which is Edgerton Street. So that's why it makes it a nice introduction to that. And of course, at 4 years of age, I went to the school, which is the reason we moved, because the school is literally on the other side of the road from the house I live in Edgerton Street. So it's great, they blow the whistle in the school playground and I'm still getting dressed in my bedroom, and before they've queued up to go in, I'm out the house. It's like 5 to 9, because it used to be 9 o'clock, 5 to 9 I'm awake and I'm out there and I'm straight into school, fell out my front door, straight into the schoolyard. So it was great living like that. But what I didn't realise is that the major Roman road, which is King Street, which is now the A49. Most of the A49 where we live is King Street, but it kind of veers off and then the road cuts through the middle of the village I live in, which is Stockton Heath, and goes smack bang through the middle of the school, through the playground, through the middle of the school building and straight through the playground at the back. So it's no more than 50 yards from the front of the house is where this Roman road is. That's kind of local history which you pick up as you're sort of growing up. What I didn't realise, though, is that either side of this road is a huge Romano-Saxon cemetery. And the burials extend out from this road in all directions, including where my house sits. So the burials actually come past the house and go into the back garden and then go in towards the village. It used to be the heath, it used to be the common, and that's this area where they put the school. There's only been buildings there since Victorian times, so it's the whole settlement area that I'm in is relatively recent. The house is 1925, so they were still sort of building it and expanding it in the last century. So these remains were coming up. Now, they did the school up fairly recently. They restored it, renovated it, and moved the main building. Did a massive archaeological dig, obviously. And they're coming up with all these burials. They're getting burial pots. They're getting the foundations for monuments. They got part of a Saxon cross. They're getting all of this material coming up. And it's just the width of a 2-lane road away from the front garden, you know what I mean? So I'm like this, I'm like there with my binoculars. What have they found? What are they doing? What have they dug up this time? So I'm living on this site from about the age of 7 onwards. So back to the subject of paranormal. I'm in bed one night and I'm lying there. I'm probably about 7.5, so it'd be the summer of my 7th year. And I'm lying in bed minding my own business, and all of a sudden I wake up in the middle of the night and it's freezing cold. The room is like ice. You could see your breath. But this is summer, so it's odd. And as my eyes begin to focus, I realise that down at the bottom corner of my bed, there's a bloke standing there. But he's not just any old bloke. He's dressed in a green and brown tweed suit, matching trousers, matching waistcoat, pocket watch. Clearly Victorian. Nice, short, black hair, well kept, very dark eyes. I'm going to say possibly piercing blue, but I can't remember the details too clearly. And he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking, there's 2 things wrong with this picture. Number 1, your head's nearly at roof height, and there's no way on God's earth you're 9 foot tall. That's wrong. But even worse than that, I could see the wardrobe through him, behind him. So he's what they would call a vaporous apparition. That's what he is. He's not solid. He's clearly not solid. And he's looking at me and I'm looking at him. And I'm like, this is truly terrifying. So I remember grabbing the bed covers like and just going, whoom, disappearing under the bed covers. No idea how much time elapsed. Everyone will say, this is common with anything like this. You just lose track of time. You're not interested. But I do remember the room was warm when I came out, and he'd gone. He wasn't there anymore. Well, at that age, and when you're at junior school, you're like, well, what the hell was that? At this point, I think we're into the early 1970s. Now, in the 1970s, you had a series of books called Armada books, little paperbacks like that, and they used to send them round for the school book clubs. And you'd have things like the Armada Book of Ghosts, the Armada Book of, unseen, strange cryptozoology, whatever, the Armada Book of UFOs, the Armada Book of Witchcraft. So I'm like, yes, I'm going to have all these. And I pretty much bought the entire set, And then I started collecting other things. People remember a magazine series called Man, Myth and Magic. It's very, very famous magazine series. And that was hardcore. There was some real, proper, hardcore occultic stuff in there. It came in loads and loads of volumes, tons of it. And then, of course, you had a lot of the famous things going on. That's where the books for like Arthur C. Clarke and, all the stuff that was associated with Crowley was coming out then. You had international mysteries coming out, big glossy books with loads of stuff in, Loch Ness Monster, Uri Geller spoon bending, all this sort of stuff. It was just so much material. So I had this huge library of stuff, which are all mysteries. It's all to do with the paranormal. It's all to do with, other dimensional stuff. So I'm reading all this stuff. I started probably in my 7th or 8th year ordering all this stuff in as a result of this experience. Certainly that it would have been academic year, end of the academic year, as my birth is in the December, so I would have been the second half of me being 7, collect as much stuff as I possibly can. At this point, of course, I am now living in a haunted house built on a cemetery. So there's many occasions when odd things are going on. Lights are coming on and off, stuff's disappearing, it's not where you left it. There's noises, there's sounds going on. And this is going on for a long time. It's running for years. At the same time as all this as well, another mate of mine, another friend I had, was his grandma and granddad had a house in a local village called Grapnell. And I didn't realise that this house was actually associated with the Alexandrian tradition, and it had a witch coven meeting there. But the kids used to go and invade it, you know what I mean? You turn up on you're in the days of the hippies here, turn up on a Friday night with your big fur coat and all the rest of it, and you could just crash in the back garden, But they had derelict cars, derelict boats, empty sheds, the entire house, the whole place was just like a playground, We finished up digging a tunnel. We started digging a tunnel in the back garden for a laugh to see how far we could get it. Really big tunnel. It's about like 12-foot hole round. And kids, being what we were back then, we just thought, we'll start digging. And we had a set of aluminium ladders. So, stick the ladders down, on we go. And then we had the second flight of ladders came out. This thing's like 20-something foot deep. You know what I mean? Huge hole. I don't know what happened to that. I'm going to assume that somebody filled it in at some point, but it was massive. Anyway, that's a sideline. Don't know why we dug it either. I think we just dug it for a laugh over a number of weekends. Anyway, I got to know the owners, this grandma and granddad character. He was very old, and he was the magister or magus for a coven. So he didn't go in circle. This is old tradition. He didn't go in circle, but his missus, who was the high priestess, did. She ran the circle. And I got to know this old fella really well. In fact, I'm telling you a story here that's kind of paranormal, but isn't. I will get back on track, because I'm just going to say the two early memories I have of that. He obviously clocked the fact that I could see things, and I was not like other kids. There was something different, clearly. And I shared a lot of my experiences with him, and he shared a lot of material back as well. And he said, you're interested in this witchcraft stuff? I went, yeah, kind of. Don't really know anything about it. He said, I've got just a book for you in it, about this big, green canvas cover. And he hands me this book, and I'm thinking, keys to the universe. It's going to be, some kind of, grimoire, Key of Solomon or something like that. And he hands me this book like this. And I open it up like that, and it's British Herbs. Book of British Herbs. Now, there's a lesson in that, because if you're going to start, you're going to have to start where you are, in the country you live, with the magic that fits the place where you're at. You know what I mean? And he gave me this book, British Herbal Society or something it was, this little green book of herbs, and I just soaked it up. And still to this day, I can walk down like a country lane, and I can go, well, that'll cure that, and that'll heal that, and you can eat that, and you can, fantastic. What a grounding, you know what I mean? So when he says to you, can you go and get me some, wood sorrel or whatever, or, whatever you need, I just tootled off and got it because I knew what I was doing. But then he started feeding me other stuff as well. And the second story, I was probably, how old would I be? Certainly in my 8th year, possibly heading for my 9th year. And I just blundered in one day, as you do at a weekend, blundered into the kitchen, and there's this old guy who must have been in his 80s, clearly he's not with us anymore, was chatting to these two figures. And one of them was a little short bloke, he's in a pinstripe suit, older bloke with a hat. And next to him is this socking great big, over 6 foot, probably 6'2", thin, blonde-haired supermodel. It's the only way I can describe this woman. And I'm only very young, sort of, So I'm being my usual self, and I'm gassing and I'm gabbing and talking this, that and the other. And I just overheard the old guy say to this fella, well, it's really nice to meet you, Alex, and I hope I'll meet you again soon. And that was it. And this couple left. Well, it turns out it's Alex Sanders and Maxine Sanders, because they have covens in Cheshire. Their main coven was in like Alderley Edge or whatever.
Yeah.
And this group was clearly associated with them. So I, without even realising it took me ages to remember, I saw a photograph and I'm like, I know him. He died in the 1980s, so I must have met him when he was probably functioning in his prime. He'd have been in his 40s. I think he died in his 50s. But anyway, I actually met them. there's a nice twist, there's a nice conclusion to this. This is the second story, but there's a nice little conclusion to the second story. I think it was 1993. Yeah, 1993 I think it was. I did Pagan Federation conference at Lanrider Waterfall in Wales. And there's an old lady, her hair's tied up, and she's got her glasses like that, and she's pacing up and down outside this tent with her notes. And I'm dressed as a Celt. I'm dressed in blue, so I've got a blue shield and my blue cloak and, you know, big dagger and sword and helmet, and I'm wandering around dressed as a Celt. And I wandered up to her and I said, if you don't mind me asking, you know, what's the running of the speakers here? Because I'm giving a talk and that. And she said, I'm really nervous. She said, we're doing it in this tent here. She said, it's only the second time I've ever done a talk. And I looked at her and she looked at me and I'm like, I know you. Where do I know you from? And she said, I know you as well. You've got a vibe I recognise. And it was Maxine. It was Maxine Sanders. And we met up again. All those years later, she called me a little blue Celt. That's what she called me. She said, I remember you as a kid. She said, you were really gobby. You wouldn't shut up. She said, you were very lippy. She said, I remember you. So anyway, it was nice to meet up again. And she's had, anyway, I won't go into it, but her life path and where she ended up going and what she did in her life actually ended up being remarkably similar to my life path and what I ended up doing and where I finished up going. That was a bit of a digression. But that brings us nicely up to the fact that I was interested in all of the hidden stuff and all of the occult stuff and that. Meanwhile, I'm still living in the same house. So now I'm graduating from junior school. I'm moving up to high school, way high school, 11 or 12 or however old I was then. So I moved up to high school, loads and loads of mates. And of course you do what you do. You invite your mates back, and you have house parties and play loud rock music and you do what you do. Anyway, one of my mates comes walking up to the front of the house and I open the front door and he said, you're really posh, you are. I'm like, what do you mean I'm really posh? He said, you've got a black and white TV set in your bedroom. Because you can see the window, from the front as you walk up to the house. Mine's the top left one. He's like, you've got a black and white TV set in your bedroom. That's really posh. And I'm like, no, I haven't. He said, well, your bedroom's all lit up. Like you're watching a black and white TV. And I'm like, but I'm downstairs. I'm not in my bedroom. So the pair of us walked back out and looked up like, the bedroom's just blacked out. Completely blacked out. So clearly you'd seen something in that window that was lighting up the entire bedroom that was white. He's still alive. I'm still in contact with him today, so he'll back me up. Another incident, I come back. There's another mate, another lass, and me, and a couple of others are coming along as well, and we're gonna get together. And at this point, we're like, let's do a séance in the bedroom. Let's go up there and see what we can get happening. At this point, my whole bedroom just looks like the occult museum. I've got so much stuff in there, collected tons of stuff. And I've got weapons all over the walls and this, that and the other, and Second World War gun holster, leather gun holster by the light switch. And so we open the bedroom door like that and I flick the light switch on and this leather gun holster goes pshoo across the room like that. So the girl who's just behind me like that's like that. What just happened? And I'm like, well, it's a haunted house. What do you expect? Stuff happens, She's like, yeah, can't believe that. You had it rigged, you've got it on elastic bands or something, or wire or cut. I'm like, no. I said, that happens all the time. I said, look, I'll show you. So I went over to the other side of the room, because this thing's gone like 10 foot across the room. So I picked the gun holster up, walked back like that, big nail sticking out the wall, slid it back onto the nail like that. I said, right, what's this? So we backed out the room again and shut the door. Switched the light off, backed out and shut the door. And we stood on the hall and I'm like, let's do the same again and see what happens. So we open the door and I flick the switch on and this gun holster goes across the room again. At which point the couple of people behind me are like, right, we're not going in that room. That's it. That's enough. We're not going in. We're not even going to go through that doorway. We're going back downstairs. So that was it. That was as far as we got. But again, that's in front of witnesses. And I'm still in contact with her. Still know her. And then I had loads of experiences. I woke up one night and you could hear this bump, 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 bump. I'm lying in bed. What on earth is going on? Then you hear this bump, 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 bump. And then it starts again. Bump, 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 bump. What the hell is that? It's the middle of the night and I'm trying to get to sleep. But I'm lying there. I thought, right, next time I hear these footsteps, I'm going to count them. So you get this boom, 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 boom. And there's 13 of them, because that's how many steps are at the front of, to get from upstairs down to the bottom of the house. 13 steps, which is interesting because there were 13 rocks on the rockery. The house number is number 13. There were 13 windows in the building, 13 steps to the top floor as it was originally built, and it was built at a time when they didn't do number 13s. Because they'd skip the numbers, and it's the last building at the top of the street. So there's no reason to give it that number. Didn't need to have that number. They could easily have put another number on it. So it's been given the number 13. And we're only the second owners of the building, so the first owners who built it clearly knew what they were doing. So it's worth mentioning that. Anyway, 13 steps. So this thing goes off again, and I count it, and I thought, right, I've got you, you beggar. You're at the top of the stairs. That's where you are. I just heard you come up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump out, flick the bedroom light on, pull the door open, and you'll be there, whatever you are. So I jumped out of bed, flick the light on, open the door, nothing. So I'm like, I could be here all night. You know what I mean? At this point, I'm very philosophical about it. I'm like, do whatever it is you want to do, carry on doing it all night, I really don't care. So turn the light off, shut the door, got back into bed like that. Sure enough, boom, 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 it's off again. Thing with these things is though, they sounded like cloven hooves.
All right.
So that was a bit like, ooh, real creepy stuff. You can fast forward a bit now, because obviously if I'm living in a haunted house, well, a haunted house is a haunted house. The question would be, is it still haunted? Over the years I've come to the conclusion that it's a bit of a portal. Stuff comes and goes. It's got its resident ghosts and its resident spirits, but whether anything happens depends on the person, depends on the people. So I lived there till I was 21, then I moved away. And then I came back again in 2019, 2020 to look after my dad, because he was the last person in the house and he needed caring for. And ultimately that's where I've ended up living. So we decided we were going to do the house up. Let's, rebuild. That's something we can do. You can still carry on building during lockdown. And we'd already initiated that process prior to lockdown. So we got stuck in builders. We've now got builders. So you can imagine, we told all the builders at the beginning, we said, this house is haunted. So, if anything unusual happens, don't worry about it. And the builders are like, yeah, right, okay. All right then, all covered in tattoos, big like, rough, tough Lancashire Northern builders, you know what I mean? And there's one guy, SAS, he had the numbers, he had the tat and everything, ex-SAS fella, and he's the foreman. Anyway, the foreman comes walking up to the door again, so it's front of the house again. Not my window this time, it's my dad's bay window. And he's walking up to the front door and he waves, and this guy with a sort of a splattering of beard and a flat hat waves back from the window. Knocks on the door, I open the door, and this builder fella's like, hey, your dad's looking quite healthy today, he's looking really good, he's just waved at me and tells the same story. He's looking really all, smartened up with his flat hat and everything, looks really good. So I look him squarely in the eye and I go, well, I can tell you now, it's not my dad. Because he's got Alzheimer's dementia and he can only shuffle round, I said, and he's at the back kitchen doing the washing up. I said, there's no way in the 30 seconds it's took me to open this front door that he's got from that bedroom to the back kitchen. Anyway, all the colour just drained out of this fella's, you know what I mean? He just went white. And I'm like, you've seen him. I said, you've seen him. I said, that's the ghost. It's the guy in the Victorian suit, green around. Only he wears a flat hat sometimes. I said, and you've seen him.
This is the one you saw.
It's the same figure I saw, but now you fast forward like, a lifetime. It's the same figure. He's still in there. But there's a great kicker to this. I mean, other builders had other experiences, like you put your hammer down, you turn back, no hammer, you put nails down and screws down and bits of plumbing equipment, you look back, they're gone. They turn up, 3 or 4 days later in a bucket in another part of the house, and all the time, constantly, the builders started to take it in the stride once they got creeped out and they got used to it, But the postscript is, while we were doing the renovations, we found the old fireplace, which we've put back in, and we also found in the floor, in the lounge, someone had cut through 3 of the floorboards to create a small opening. And my dad knew it was there because he'd been down it, but we didn't know it was there. When we opened it, there's a half cellar, so there's about 4 foot of distance under the house. full of ash, and that's the drain. That's the drainage system. That's where everything goes, keeps the whole property dry and everything. But us being us, get the mobile phone, put it on for video, stick it down the hole, with the light on, swing it all the way around this basement. We'll see what we've got, like this. And the builders are all gathered round. We're all gathered round, watching the footage like this, and it swings all the way around like this. And then there in the ash is a flat hat. So you can imagine the effect it had on this foreman. The foreman he went white, and he went, I'm sure that's the hat the fellow was wearing. And it's in the ash down in the basement. So clearly the fella, whoever he was famous for wearing flat hats, and he'd left one behind in the building down below. You could tell it had never been disturbed. There's a big thick layer of nonsense right across the top of it. You could see it buried in the top layer of the ash, but very clearly you could see it on this video footage. So growing up in a situation like that, growing up with, shall we say, a heightened awareness of the supernatural, heightened awareness of phenomena, a heightened awareness of spirituality, because I had a conversion experience in 1978, so that changed things a little bit from that point on. Not quite sure what I converted to, but it was certainly a very, very profound supernatural experience there. Which put me on the path of, I always was a Gnostic, but I've ended up becoming a Christian Gnostic, which apparently is complete anathema to everybody, you know what I mean? Been thrown out of better churches than this one. That's kind of where that took me. But yeah, the phenomena that was going on, things that were happening, I've had a lifetime to consider, what these things are and what they mean and perhaps where they come from, and to think about them. In a very gritty, real, practical way. Now, what is interesting is there are no strangers in inverted commas, living in the house now. Just me and the stepdaughter, and we are what we are. I've always been there. So, funnily enough, most of the activity now has died down. So we don't get things like that happening. We still get sounds, noises, and bits and bobs, which could potentially be something, supernatural. But very often it's not. Very often it's the house doing what the house does, But nothing of any real, watch something happen now. I'm gonna go home tonight and there'll be a full blown apparition opens the front door for me. That's usually what happens when you say. But no, touch wood. At the moment, there's nothing really drastic going on. It's just nice and quiet.
Do you mind talking about this experience you had that changed?
Okay, 1978. Wow. Yeah, I can do it in. I'll kind of cut it short. It does relate to the witch coven that I was hanging out with. I was too young to go in circle. I was too young to be a part of the adult side of it. Old traditional witchcraft, you can't go in circle or even consider going in circle until usually you end up being about the age of 19, because they won't train you until you get to 16. They won't even start. That doesn't happen. And then it's 3 years. So by the time you hit your 19th birthday, then you're part of it. You're initiated as part of the coven. So I'm just, pick up the story. I'm just coming up to 16 at this point. They were having some trouble, as still occurs today, with the local Pentecostal church that wouldn't leave them alone. So, you're all going to hell, even though there isn't a hell yet because there hasn't been a judgment, but judge not lest they be judged. So, there's that kind of element of stuff going on at this point, and it's if bang what thud. So what they did was, the coven basically said to all the youngsters that were meeting at weekends, just go down to the church and wreak havoc. Just go down there and cause as much trouble as you possibly can and get them away, distract them away, so they don't bother us. Plus the fact they don't like the idea of, people trying to convert people here, there and everywhere. So anyway, and it was back in the 1970s, it was a different situation. Very much us and them, there wasn't really any kind of crossover. So that's what we did. There's probably about a dozen of us. We all got together, we all piled down to the youth group, discovered that they met on a Thursday, I think it was, so we went down on Thursday, we turn up, drinking all the drinks, eating all the biscuits, wrecking the snooker table, wreaking havoc. unplugging the stereo system, messing all the games boards up, and all this, that and the other. And but then eventually it whittled down. People get fed up with doing this, especially teenagers. So it was a laugh for the first couple of weeks. Then people started dropping off. There finished up being about 3 or 4 of us that ended up there. And we got wind of the fact that the ladies all went to the study group on a Tuesday night. So we're like, I like the sound of that. Yeah, we'll go and have a bit of this, Not going to do a Sunday, we're going to hear a Sunday service or whatever. So we started turning up at the study group. Eventually we got to hear about this weekend away. The particular denomination have church weekends away. And again, we're all like, hey, 3 days locked in the middle of nowhere with, predominantly female youth group. Can't fail. Definitely can't fail. Oh no, they're coming to lock me up. No, they've gone. So we all signed up. This Clovelly Hall in Shropshire it was at. Whitchurch. Clovelly Hall, Whitchurch, Shropshire. So we all signed up for this weekend. You get picked up on the Friday night, you get dropped off again on the Sunday night, and you go off, and it's basically a Christian conference. That's what it is. So we're all on the back of the bus. You're not supposed to swear or drink or do any of these things. So, out come the tinnies. We're all on the back seat, wreaking havoc and being the usual rock and rollers that we were. And then I just remember driving down this country lane, and there's a couple of gate posts. And as soon as we went across this cattle grid, you go across the grid, that was it. I noticed that I'd lost any spiritual powers, presence, anything I'd developed. I didn't have the urge to swear anymore, and the same thing had happened to everybody else. Everyone just went completely quiet. And we're driving up this long drive, and it's only afterwards we discover this has been a Christian conference centre for 160 years. So, the devil himself could turn up at the gate and wouldn't go across that cattle grid. Absolutely wouldn't. So I'm still dealing with this as we're getting off the coach, and we're getting our bags and stuff, and got my eye on a lass over there that I quite fancy, but we'll come back to that, And when I say come back to it, I ended up dating her later on in the year at a youth disco. Right, I have come back to that. Get me bags and all the rest of it, and pile into the dorms, lads' dorm or whatever. And then the rest of the conference, right up to the Sunday afternoon, I spent sat up a tree. Because what I used to do was go and sit up trees. They're fantastic. If you find a branch sticking out, you can sit up a tree, and it's like the whole tree gives you a hug. And it's a great place to sit. And there was a Californian redwood tree right in front of this Clovelly Hall. So I'm sat in the bough of this tree, and I spent most of the Saturday up there, and I'm watching these people wandering around, reading books and discussing notes, and and then they'd all vanish and they'd go off to a seminar or something like this, and Sunday morning service and all this, that and the other, and then end of the Sunday afternoon they're having a goodbye everybody kind of service, And at this point I'm really frustrated because I can feel something like beyond anything I'd felt before, something enormously powerful. So I went to the guy that was running the weekend, no idea, can't remember what his name is, didn't know what subject he was speaking on. Up to this point we've never met, so I go up to him on the Sunday afternoon, I tell him how I feel and what's happened up to this point, so I give him the same story. Well, him being of that particular path, he says, well, clearly God is trying to talk to you. Why don't you talk back? And I'm like, load of nonsense, load of rubbish. But then there's a little kind of voice in the back of my head going, well, you might have a point, spirituality being what it is, you've just been in a divine place, effectively, sitting on, on a tree, out in the wide open, nobody'd argue with that. It's a fabulous place to be. Yeah, maybe something is trying to reach me. So he said, well, come along to the service, the closing service, and just sit in and see what people do. So I'm sat in this service. Anyway, I think he'd sort of kind of conned me a bit, because it turns out it's a communion service. And I've not got a clue what communion is. I mean, yes, in the craft they have bread and wine and salt and various other bits and bobs. So I'm familiar with the elements and that. And I'm thinking, okay. So they send around this tray, and it's got bread on it. You could see people going, taking proper bread. So I thought, I'll do the same. So the tray comes past like that. I take a piece of bread. I'm like, okay, pop it in. And you can feel this dry bread going down, you know, and it gets to sort of somewhere around about here somewhere. And then this is absolutely what happened. It was like the top of my head just went kaboom, just opened up like that. And everything just went whoosh. That's it. And I'm gone. I'm not there anymore. And the next thing that happens is, because I know this is what they do, they send round an oval tray with lots of little wine glasses in, and that makes its way round. And somebody somewhere, probably the person next to me, you know, sticks one of these glasses in my hand and the tray goes past. And somewhere on cue, automatically I drink this, you know, I knock it back. And everything then just goes, comes back in like that. And I could feel like a lid shut. It was like something up here had closed, wham, like that. And I'm sat there and I'm like, what on earth was that? What just happened? And I'm looking around like this and I'm thinking, where am I? Who am I? What year is this? What's going on? All the normal information that's knocking around in your head just wasn't there. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So it takes me a few minutes. Fortunately, they're all sat round, you know, blah, blah, drone at the front and, you know, singy. And I'm just sat there and I'm thinking, okay, get a grip, you know. So you find your feet, you find out, you know, yes, okay. And then I just shuffled out at the end. They finished it and I shuffled out and I grabbed a mate of mine who I knew from the youth group and I said, look, this is what's just happened. What's going on? So he told me where I was, what year it was. He said, really strange. He said, you just had, I think he said something like a Damascus Road experience. You know, it's like zap. Apparently the Apostle Paul got something similar. He got zapped, but he went blind for 3 days. And anyway, I'm walking around and I'm thinking, I'm not the same. And I am still not the same. You know, you fast forward a bit, and all of a sudden I discovered I seemed to know what the contents of the Bible were, but I didn't know them as a book. This is where it gets a bit creepy, this, right? So I didn't know it as a book. So you got, you know, all these different books, you know, with verses and titles. And I didn't know them as that. I just knew them as continuous stories. And the Bible's made of 66 scrolls that originally were all written as a continuous narrative. All the sections and the titles and the headings, the numbers, they were all put in medieval times. So I knew what it said. I knew the content as if somebody had orally told me what the content was. So that's the first mystery. Hence being thrown out of better churches than this one. You know what I mean? I'm a preacher's worst nightmare, because, you know, they're down at the front giving it all the, you know, from the pulpit and that, and I'll stick my hand up and go, but it doesn't say that. You're wrong, and I can tell you why. You know, I didn't make any friends, believe me, early on. And I started reading the Bible as well, which was even worse, because then I could eventually tell people where stuff was and learn, you know, oh, I know that, yeah, I know that as well, you know, voyage of discovery. But then it was a while later that somebody actually said, you know, communion service, bread and the wine, there can be 20 minutes, even longer, 25 minutes, half an hour, between those two elements, as they call it. Time passes. I wasn't here. I was not here for that period of time. Can't tell you where I went or what was going on. I kind of tried to rationalise it, and I sort of thought, well, you know, if God was going to sort someone out who had talents but had then ended up being kind of sucked into the occult, the dark side. I was very dark side, I really was, you know, I was the original goth. I'd gone really dark, really dark, badly dark. And clearly what had happened was all of that had just gone, wrung out like a, you know, wet sponge, and then the stuff that I needed in order to proceed forward in life then was dropped back in with a few adjustments, you know. So yeah, miraculous Damascus Road, you know. Funnily enough, something very similar happened to Maxine. She finished up starting a church in the 1990s in Wales. People don't realise that. You need to get her book, Firechild. Her cover name was Firechild. My cover name was Snowchild. So we have a lot of parallels, loads of parallels. And she wrote this book and she went off into the church. And I ended up going off into the church. And then somehow we managed to merge the two together all our past experiences, everything we knew, the fact that, there was all this occultic stuff and all the rest of it. At the end of the day, that's what the Bible is. It's an occult book. It's a book of hidden knowledge. And it's a conspiracy because nobody wants you to read it. Don't go near that. It's only got 3,500 years of magical, personal, divine experience in it, but you don't want to read it. Don't go near it. You know what I mean? It's a bag of nonsense. It's all been changed. They said, no. The more you dig, the more you learn, the more you'll finish up leaving society behind and turning into something else. I guess you could actually accuse God of making me into a conspiracy theorist, but believe me, it's just as bad right across the board. There's conspiracy in the craft, witchcraft, there's conspiracy in the church, there's conspiracy in all those aspects. Everything's got it. Because people are people, The biggest conspiracy of them all is that, it's like, if I was a millionaire and I had £1 million in the bank, I wouldn't let anybody else near it because that's my £1 million, you know what I mean? That's the kind of attitude they have. Well, if I've got all the revelation and the knowledge and I know what's going on spiritually, I'm not going to let anybody near that either. It's some kind of insurance policy. So that's the spiritual conspiracy. Nobody tells anybody anything except this great huge pack of nonsense. There's this huge amount of rubbish out there which they're all very happy to argue over. Let me give you a good example because I've actually answered the question now. I've told you what happened to me. That was my conversion experience, but I'll give you an example of how this nonsense works. The Devil. The big film that was out in the 1970s, The Exorcist.
Yeah.
You can probably remember this because churches went out on the street. They had placards. Do not watch this movie. You watch this movie, you're going to hell. You know what I mean? This demons and this, that and the Exorcist. Okay. Well, if you start winding this back a little bit, hang on a minute. Why were they wasting time out on the streets and not doing something else more profitable? Okay. So straight away, the whole of that body of the church are putting all that time and effort into something that is utterly meaningless. Because at the end of the day, that is a massive distraction. And there's absolutely no way that by accusing someone of going to hell that you're ever going to convert anybody. I hinted at it earlier on. I said, you can't make that judgment. God makes that judgment. And as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been a judgment yet. Vis-a-vis, there is therefore no hell. So they're all out there, doing this. And then you've got the second side of it is the movie itself. The movie itself actually is all about good fighting evil at the end of the day. But the majority of it, the concept, the idea of demons, interdimensional and all the rest of it, it's not fact. We're not dealing with facts. We're dealing with a sort of amorphous, occultic grey zone which you can't nail down. So the movie is what the movie is. It's a movie and it's made by people to be shocking, and that's a movie. So that's not necessarily a good grounding for, theology or whatever. And then you've got the devil running around with his red bat wings and his, red pyjamas and his pointy tail and a couple of horns, Best case scenario, Tim Curry in Legend, who incidentally it turns out is actually the devil's son. He's not the devil. The devil's not in Legend. It's the devil's son. Check that up. It's Tim Curry with his massive horns, cloven hooves, you know what I mean, and all the rest of it. But the devil doesn't look like that. The devil's never looked like that. It's completely fake. Totally fake. When you start digging in, I thought the devil was an angel of light, wasn't he? Fell from heaven like lightning, big flash, angel of light and all the rest of it. And, and the devil's an individual character. He's not omnipresent, omnipotent and all this, that and the other. He kind of ran in, dropped the mic and then ran out. That was his modus operandi, Once the idea of error and the idea of sin or whatever you want to call it is introduced, we do the rest. He doesn't have to do anything. He's probably, 40 days, 40 nights out from Jerusalem, sat in a cave somewhere, sipping tea, So that's fake as well. So you look at that scenario and you think, hang on, 1970s, you've got fake, and everyone's bought into it. It's a lie. It's a con. It is, in fact, a conspiracy. That's what it is. It's a conspiracy. If you come face to face with Lord Lucifer himself, the devil incarnate, it's going to be a bloke in a grey suit. White-haired old bloke in a grey suit. And even then he isn't going to lie to you. He's not going to tell you lies, because if you look at his mode of operation, even in the Garden of Eden when he was, tempting Eve, he didn't go up to Eve and go, "Hey, this big shiny apple here, go and have a bite of that." Well, it's not an apple for a start. It's all figurative anyway. It was never an apple. What he says to, all he says to Eve is, "Did God tell you not to eat the apple?" Well, actually he's got a point, because God didn't tell Eve not to eat the apple, because God told Adam. And Adam told Eve. So actually, that temptation is almost like error. It's almost like a temptation based on omission. Because actually, he's telling her the truth. And when he comes face to face with Jesus in the wilderness, the 40 days, 40 nights thing, every single word that comes out of the devil's mouth is true. He's quoting scripture. He's quoting the truth at Jesus. But Jesus is clever enough to know the rest of scripture, which is the bits the devil's leaving out. Now that tells you all you need to know. When you know that's how the devil operates, yes, he'll tell you the truth, but it's not going to be the whole truth. And if there's anything in there that's a little bit dodgy, that's what he'll take advantage of and use that against you. So conspiracy, now we're on Conspiracy 101. That's where it's coming from. You know what I mean? So I say this quite a lot in interviews. I say, if you're looking for the rulers of the world, the big triangle with the eye in the middle of it, and the secret societies, and is it the Freemasons? No, definitely not. Is it Skull and Bones? Is it some of those other societies? Well, probably not. And the answer is, if you know about them, so let's say you know about the Bezos and the Zuckerbergs and the Musks, and you know about all these people. They are categorically not the Antichrist. It's not Bush or Trump either. They're not. And the answer is because you know about them. Because the people who are the men in grey. I've coined this phrase, the men in grey suits. You don't know who they are, you don't know where they are, you don't know what the names are, you don't know what power and authority they have. They're not in the media. They're not on the internet. They're nowhere. They're nobodies, and they don't exist.
So all these people, like the Zuckerbergs and all the Trump, and these are the puppets.
Correct. They all answer. Even the kings and queens, even the royal families, they all answer to somebody else. Now, people are going to go...
Yeah, I've always said with that we will never know these names or who these people are.
Exactly. So people will say, well, how the hell do you know they're there? How do you know they exist? Well, it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. Imagine a jigsaw puzzle. You're putting the puzzle together. You get to the end, there's a piece missing. You know what's on that piece. You know what shape that piece is, because you can see what's around it, but you don't have the piece. And that's how I know these men in grey are there. That's how I know that they really exist. Because when you look at the evidence, I've had a lifetime of doing it. I've been fortunate enough to be able to do it on so many levels, from invisible occultic to physical conspiracy, I've looked at it on so many levels, and there is that missing piece. Wherever you go, you've got the same shape, the same style, the same everything, and it's not there. It's conspicuous by its absence,
So when people talk about they've done this and they've done that, you never know who they are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the people who exist, the men in grey, do not want to be outed. They do not want to be attacked. They certainly do not want to be disinherited. They're quite happy with whatever it is they've got, be it physical, spiritual, whatever, financial. And it does go back in a sense to where we came in with this branch of the talk about the occult that was around in the 1970s and 60s and 50s and so on. Those people, there was a conscious decision made when they repealed the Witchcraft Act in 1952-53. There was a conscious decision made. Do we go public? or do we go underground and go secret? And the occult world split. It deliberately split at that point. So you've got the public ones. You've got your Alexandrians, your Gardnerians, your Crowleyans, your, LaVey and the Church of Satan, and you name it. Big banners, big, sensational, Hollywood, call it what you like. And then you've got the other side of it, and they disappeared, and they've had 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020s. They've had 60 years of being underground, in the background, disappeared, unknown, I've been lucky enough to have lived long enough to see these guys disappear. I saw them go underground, and ladies for that matter, and they're still there. Why would they not still be there,
How long do you think they've been here?
I think
with humanity.
Well, archaeologically, if you look at it, because that's all we've got to go on. At the end of the day, all we've got is, as far as I'm concerned, you can theorise and this, that and the other, but if you've got some kind of physical evidence, that puts it in a different place. Looking at the physical evidence, I think there's always been this higher echelon of humanity. But, we're in a funny position. Take the pharaohs, for example, at the moment. The vast majority of people in Egypt had no access whatsoever to the pharaohs, and even the pharaohs themselves had no access whatsoever to some of the temples. There were places that people could go at all levels of society, and places they couldn't go. They were not allowed to go. And we get a very skewed view now of how Egypt worked, because now we can go anywhere. It's in ruins. You can barge into a pharaoh's tomb without any problem at all. But things like that were just anathema. You couldn't do that at the time when the society was functioning. And we're in the same position now. Okay? How many people in the UK, if they fell out now with Rishi Sunak, could go down to number 10 and go, bing bong, and he opens the door and they go, can we have a chat? Got a few problems, mate. Well, it's never going to happen. So we're at the same position now here with that situation as they were 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. Let's push it. Babylon, 7,000, 8,000, certain people in certain positions are inaccessible. And again, like Egyptian pharaoh, there he is. Hey, Tutmosis the First, yeah, big pharaoh comes out on a parade. Yeah, there he is on his gold, whatever. So you go, yeah, there's Rishi Sunak or Boris or whoever, hey, there he is. But you don't know who he's working with. You haven't got the foggiest idea.
Working with or working for.
Or, yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, you don't know. You're not there. And it's the same now as it was in Egypt and Babylon and, you name it. Or the Chaldees. You go into any of these ancient civilizations, and the people who are inaccessible, you've got the public face, and then a whopping great big team of people all running around doing loads and loads of things, and you never see them. And they're not civil servants. They're a bit beyond that, you know what I mean? They're a little bit above that. And they do have a say in what goes on, and they do pull the strings. And they're all running around, you know what I mean? And it's, so in a sense, what we're dealing with as mere, minions, you've got this big block of stuff that kind of starts with the Prime Minister and drops down to us. That's a block of society that you're totally aware of. But then you can also take the Prime Minister and people on that level, Charles, King Charles and all that. They've got people above them. They've got their team, people that work for them and people they work for, and there's most of them are probably at Davos at the moment, for this big conference they've got over there. But even that, we know that's taking place. We know who's involved. You can get the records, you can get the notes, you can go and watch clips online and this, that and the other. So even that's a bit of a public staged circus, but you don't know who they're working with for the other 363 days of the year or whatever, 360 odd days of the year. You don't know what they're doing or where they are or what mechanisms they're using and who's doing this, that and the other, I think we're starting with the biggest conspiracy of them all.
When we talk about are they controlling, not from this plane, what we're living on, but from an outer plane, a another dimension, and they're controlling the plane, what we're living on, as it's being controlled.
Okay, yes and no. It's got a kind of... There's two answers to this, and I'll explain what I mean, okay? It doesn't matter what you're looking at, okay? Take any of the paranormal phenomena. So you can take anything, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, aliens and abductions, ghosts, any of the occult, any of the supernatural. And what you're dealing with is a mixture of things that are true and things that aren't true. So it's a very hard area to investigate, because you've got to try and weed out the wheat from the chaff. And there's a lot of chaff, believe me. There's a lot of nonsense and a lot of rubbish. So it's a difficult path to follow. It's a difficult subject to tackle, because there is so much nonsense. Okay, there is so much rubbish attached to these different subjects. And what seems to happen is that, in the interest of not letting the truth out, you'll get something that is true. So they'll state something, and then everybody will go woof, dive on it, and then spread misinformation, because everybody has their own agendas, and they're all trying to, whatever.
We're sort of seeing that within this Miami thing as well, aren't we?
Boy, are we seeing it at the moment, yeah. I mean, you've got the Miami aliens thing is one incident. I wasn't going to get too specific, because I don't want this interview to be time related, but that's a good example. Some people are saying one thing, something clearly happened, bits of evidence got out at the time. The police chief in charge of the whole incident won't talk, things like that. So clearly something's going on there, and then everyone's jumped on. Hey, look at me, I've got digitally recreated photographs of, what they look like, and this and the other. Everyone's on it. So, like I said, that's transient. I'm not even going to really buy into that, but it's a great example of what's going on.
Yeah.
You can see what goes on. Something really happens. Roswell, for goodness sake, take that as an example. That's a classic, something came down in that desert, and there were witnesses and there were debris and things happened. That's all we know. Everything else that's gone on since then, since those first two, on the day and the day after newspaper reports, Roswell Daily Record, since then, everything else is up for grabs and everybody's jumped on it. Tons of stuff has just been piled on, till eventually you're almost at the point where it's impossible to investigate the original incident, The military did a great job, because yes, they threw the whole weather balloon thing out there, but by not telling the truth, nature abhors a vacuum, everything's been sucked in, and now it can be anything you want it to be, and that unfortunately is how things tend to work.
They cause chaos from it.
Yeah, but chaos, back to that jigsaw puzzle, chaos from nothing. Not from something, it's chaos from not being there, because people fill in the blanks. So even if the original incident was true, so using the same formula I used in the previous bit when we were talking about the devil, even if you use that formula, why not just tell the truth? Because no one's going to believe it anyway. You see? I used to call it the double lie. So like, there's a lie over here, and what we'll do is we'll make that lie so big that everybody else buys into it and piles on board. And it's the double lie. And it's smoke and mirrors, because the truth isn't in either of those. The truth is somewhere else. See what I mean?
Yeah.
And you can see that happen all the time. That, to anybody that wants to look into conspiracies and they want to look into the unknown, the paranormal, the supernatural, bear the double lie in mind, okay? Don't just accept what you're looking at, and particularly don't just accept what other people say, because that's no use. What you want is source material. You want source evidence. Don't get me wrong, because even writers fall foul with this. I try not to, because it's in my interest. It's my fundamental belief system as a Gnostic is to go for gnosis, is to go for truth and to go for knowledge. And very often that's more exciting. The truth is gobsmacking compared to the nonsense that they put out there. But I'm not going to name names, because I wouldn't do that. But there's a lot of authors out there that like to get a tiny little kernel of truth, and bolt as much rubbish onto it as they possibly can. You get volumes out of that, volumes of stuff. Come and see me doing one of my live talks if you want me to tear into a few of those, because I've got a few I really enjoy, really love it. Yeah, I'm not going to name names, going to avoid that. But just be aware of this idea of the double lie. Okay, very often there's money involved as well. You know, the live version is extremely profitable, and then to feed off the live version again, they kind of interfeed. You know, it's profit, neither of which actually is going to get you to where you want to be, really. You know, in terms of the truth.
Yeah, and I'll tend to when I buy books, and sometimes you know yourself that something's not right when you're reading it, and it'll put me off a certain book, and I'll go and read something else and find out why. I end up finding out why it put me off, because
that's the practical outworking of what I was saying right at the very beginning. If you want to get into this area, you're going to end up with basically truth and lies. You're going to end up with this mixture, and that, you know, any book you pick up, there might be, you know, 50 pages of truth wrapped up in 200 pages of nonsense. You know, so you've got to develop the skill for, like you say, smelling out the nonsense. You know, get rid of that and try and get back to the original roots. Which any investigator, any writer, anybody out there will know is quite difficult. You know, it's not easy to achieve. So with conspiracies and that's kind of where I've ended up. You know, if it quacks like a duck and it looks like a duck, then shoot, it's a duck. You know, that's kind of where I'm at. You know, but if you apply that, then if you really go down the rabbit hole and you start looking at, you know, government, tax, military, mysteries we're not supposed to know about, you know, alien technology, who's running the show, religion, I can just keep going. There's a big list, okay?
But look, let's go back to the alien technology.
Yeah, you like the aliens.
My belief. We can take the alien away from that, because it's, I think, the technology that we see when we see UFOs or UAPs or whatever you want to call them, I do believe they've been made here on this planet.
Well, there's a guy, I saw a quote the other day, the guy that used to run Skunk Works, which is the US, you know, military development, prototype development company. Back in the 1990s, he said, we can do anything. We can already do. In fact, that was his words. He said, we can already do anything. So 20 to 30 years ago, Skunk Works were doing all kinds of ridiculous things. I've seen some of the bits that were around then, because obviously I've done a lot of research into crash technology based on the book that I've just put out. And I don't just mean the case that I've recorded in the book. This is the thing with that book. I've put in there what I know to be true, based on the fact that that's a tiny piece of a huge jigsaw puzzle, massive, enormous jigsaw puzzle. So all the years of investigating and looking at the issues and looking at things like Skunk Works and what have you, and prototype aircraft and what was around, going all the way back to the Second World War with Nazi technology and that. But that doesn't cover everything. This is where it starts getting interesting. It doesn't completely convincingly cover. Tesla said it, because he said the key to it all is wavelengths, frequencies. That's where it is. It's all different wavelengths. You know, you want to pass through a solid brick wall, it's not solid. It's made up of wavelengths and frequencies. You know, some things get through, other things don't. And he started that idea that everything, doesn't matter what it is, everything is made up of these different frequencies. So you can go beyond what we as sentient beings can register. You can go beyond that. You can say, well, what about invisible light? What about invisible electricities? What about invisible radio waves? What about invisible dimensions? You know, what is going on? And there is this move now, this darker side of ufology, that is saying, well, what's the difference between a little green man who comes out of a silver disc in the 21st century and a little green man that came out of a prehistoric tomb somewhere, you know, in Surrey in 1230 AD. What's the difference? You know? Or for that matter, you know, the ghost that I saw, you know, that 1 minute they're there, next minute they're not there. Okay? Bigfoot, 1 minute he's there, and next minute he's not there. Hang on a minute, his tracks just end in the snow. Bang, he's gone. He's no longer there. Let's put the cat among the pigeons. What happens if Bigfoot is one of the hairy men of the woods, these medieval guys that used to be around? And what happens if what you're seeing is the ghost of something that's become extinct? Loch Ness Monster? Is it the ghost of something that's become extinct? If you start to think outside the box and you then start looking at all these different things and think, well, hang on a minute, goblins, fairies, sprites, elementals, aliens, little green men, things that can fly and shine light, and little lights, fireflies, or things in the sky, or they're 1 minute and gone the next. As far as we're concerned, that's what we're seeing, because that's the capabilities we have as human beings. But are these things just ducking in and out of dimensions? Is it just another dimension that they duck in and out of? Is it something to do with light or time travel? What is a ghost? You're into, there's that book Vertical Plane, where when they first had the computers, someone was communicating because they were on the same location as something that had previously been there 500 years before. And they only stopped doing it when something from the future suddenly decided that wanted to communicate. Well, at this point we're switching it off, shutting it down. But that's time travel. That's another dimension. You're still dealing with another dimension. So all of a sudden the whole UFO community, the UAP community, is kind of waking up and going, hang on a minute, there's more to this than meets the eye. We've got the Hadron Collider, splitting atoms and whizzing all this stuff around, doing things that we couldn't do in the past. We've got vehicles that are flying around in the sky that you can move at incredible speeds, in air and in water. And, what on earth is going on? Clearly, the overarching blanket, if you like, is this idea of invisibility. Something that's there 1 minute and then isn't the next. Something that only seems to appear when it wants to appear, not on command, All the way back to where we started with my haunted house, somebody walks in, it's the wrong type of person, pow! Whoa, all stuff starts flying all over the place, things start appearing, lights and all the rest of it. As soon as the person's gone, it's not there anymore. It's not doing it anymore. Doesn't mean it isn't there in another dimension, in a different form, on a different wavelength. It might be the ultimate question. Might actually be the ultimate question. Like, we die. But we don't. We just change frequency, change dimension, change form. Well, if that's the case, well, you just explained, ghosts forever. That's it. That's it. You just explained it. They disappear and they come back. They disappear and they come back. The circumstances under which that happens is open to debate. You could say, well, maybe it's recorded in quartz, it's a replay, maybe it's a dimensional thing and they're coming through because you're attracting them, so you're the creative force. Maybe they're in charge of what they're doing and they come through. Now you're drifting into the realms of angels. You're going biblical. Everything that seems to happen in the Bible is nothing to do with us. It's them. Whatever they are tend to come to visit us. So it's coming the other way. The impetus, the drive for that. Have a look at all the world's religions. They all seem to follow this same idea that something can come through if it wants to. It has the power to come through. Yes, we've got the power to attract it and we can invite it and we can experience it. But at the end of the day, it either comes or it doesn't. There's 10 million people out there going to be watching this going, well, we had a seance and nothing happened. Or Joe down the road said he had a poltergeist that used to come through at 2 o'clock in the morning every night without fail. Well, when we all went down there, nothing happened. Well, that's precisely what you'd expect if the responsibility was shared. As much as we might wish for these things to sort the life out, they don't have to. They don't have to come through, But then occasionally they do. Occasionally something happens and I'll give you a good example. I don't know why I'm going to tell you this story, but I've been telling lots of personal stories and it relates to the house. My dad was not well for a long, long time and he passed away very early in the August of 2021. Was it August or September? I think it was the August. Anyway, it was 2021. He passed away in 2021. And I've got this thing now, because I'm very biblically orientated, I kind of, generate a certain presence, generate a certain force. And there's a thing in the Bible, and it's very clear, that if you're studying and you're doing something godly, something biblical, the angel of death can't get you. That's it. So it's the rabbis in Judaism say that if you're actually reading the Torah, As long as you keep reading it, you can't die. Because the angel of death has not got permission to take you at that point, okay? It stops it. So you've got the idea, the basic idea is that, if there's somebody pottering around who's particularly, I hate the word, but to use a term, godly, then the angel of death's going to back off and wait till that person's gone before he can step in and do his business. So it's Friday night, and my dad's fine. He's been sat in the chair watching the sun go down, everything's fine. And my stepdaughter brought him his tea, and he had his tea, and he got in bed. So that night, that evening, as normal, the whole house goes to bed. I go to bed, everyone goes to bed, asleep. And apparently, the following morning, I couldn't be woken up. The daughter said there was something not quite right with my dad, but she couldn't wake me up. But my dad looked all right, but she couldn't wake me up. So I wake up on the Sunday morning, bing, and I'm like, hey, it's Saturday. And the daughter's like, no, it's not. And guess what? I think your dad's gone. And I'm like, really? She's like, well, he hasn't moved. He hasn't moved. So I'm like, oh, okay. Turns out, nothing suspicious, nothing wrong. He'd passed away from a heart attack. The coroner actually phoned me up. He made a point of ringing me up about 2 days after we dropped the body off. And that's the morticians dropped the body off. And he phoned me up and he said, catastrophic heart attack. He said, your dad would not have even known. He went in his sleep. It's like flicking off a light switch. He said, gone. At which point, by this point, I'm sat there going, angel of death, the swine, knocked me out, put me out for the time it took to come and collect my dad on the Saturday night. And then I could wake up fine on the Sunday. I woke up on the Sunday morning and it was done and dusted. My dad had gone. He went exactly the way he wanted to go. Own house, own bed, fell asleep and just didn't wake up, and he was gone. Beautiful way to go. Can't argue with that. Absolutely perfect. He got exactly what he wanted to pass to the next dimension. That was it. The angel of death just came in and went, come on mate, time to go, and off they went. But he had to knock me out to do it. So it's an interesting story, that, because that is actually, it's the supernatural affecting the natural.
Yeah.
And having a say, and the say is coming from the other side. It's not us, we're not having the say in this matter. And it's obeying the rules as well. It's obeying what's been known for thousands and thousands of years. You can keep the angel of death away. You can stop him from doing his job. It's possible, because angels are just created beings, interdimensional beings that live in another dimension. So they obey rules the same as we do. But clearly, that night, the angel of death had a job to do, and I was in the way. And I would have resisted the angel of death. If I'd have known that he was coming that night, boy, would I have stopped it from happening. So, nobody chooses to lose, the mum or dad. Nobody chooses to do that. So he put me to sleep as well. Gone, knocked me out. For 48 hours. And that is the honest truth. That is absolutely the honest truth. And again, there are witnesses to that, And my dad wanted, the interesting thing is one of his wishes that he'd written it down, what he wanted to be left lying in state. And in the old days, what they would do is open the curtains and then open the windows and let the spirit go to the west. The room he slept in faced west. The seat he was sat in watching the sun go down was to the west. And so that's what we did. On the Sunday, curtains open, windows open. And, who phones the coroner on a Sunday? Nobody wants to come out on a Sunday. And we're like, well, he's already gone. It's clear he's already gone. There's nothing to do here. There's nothing suspicious. We didn't touch the body or anything. We just opened the windows. And off goes his spirit. We followed all the traditions, did exactly what we wanted. First thing Monday morning, morticians in, job done, everything fine. So the whole of that weekend just ran like a Swiss watch. But the angel of death still saw it necessary to step in and play by the rules. So that really, it's a great lesson in how other dimensions, other things work. Now, it's only because I've studied, I understood what was going on. I've seen this happen before, I've heard tales of it happening before. I know how the angels obey certain rules, biblically based, etc. But that is an extraordinarily harsh, practical, almost dark way of what we don't see directly affecting what we do see, and overruling, if you like, overruling in a powerful way and going, that's how it should be done and that's how we're going to do it, if my dad had actually written out what he wanted, beforehand and all the rest of it, he could have written the script for that weekend. It was that absolutely on the money. I've never really shared that story, so that's worth people knowing. So when I sit there and I go, there are other dimensions, there are this, there are that, there are, I'm not just talking out of some book that I read 20 years ago,
No, you've actually studied it.
And I've lived it.
Yeah. I've
lived it. I can tell you it works. I can tell you how it is, Even ghosts, I can bring in witnesses, UFOs, I've got pieces of one, Back to your original question, because I digressed a little bit there. Is it technology?
Yeah, right.
I've not forgotten, you see. I never forget a good question. I've come down with 3 decisions, and I'm not 100% which one I'm going to go with here, okay? Let's use my UFO for an example, okay? Is it one of theirs? Is it alien? Is it one of ours? Which would be the question you asked. Is it human technology? But there's also the third option, the middle one. Is it back engineered? Have they given us the technology and we've done something with it? And you know what? I haven't got the answer. Just to prove that I don't know everything. I haven't got the answer. I don't know which one of those 3 it is. Because it could be that something came down at Roswell, and it could be that we copied it, and it could be that the thing I've got sat in a box at home in a keyring is back engineered technology.
It could be they, from another dimension, have made that happen so we progress where we are up to today.
Yes, you could say that. You could say that the decision as to where we've ended up technologically has been taken by something else, somewhere else, at some point in time that suits that agenda.
Yeah.
Clearly that can happen. There's no doubt that can happen. And it's happened millions of times in over history, over the whole planet, where something has stepped in. But I can't decide at this point between those 3. I really can't do it. I can't nail my close to the mast. Whether by the time or not we reach the next conference that I do live on stage, not mentioning any names, but by the time we get there, I might know. I might have a decision. But it's one of those beautiful, beautiful things where, publisher and author decide they're going to nail this one. We're going to send the stuff away for analysis. And we sent it off to a couple of labs for analysis, and the results we got back just make a complete mess of things, because it just put us further down the rabbit hole, So even when you're dealing with the physical evidence, even when you know what you've got, it still doesn't always make sense. You can't just go, yes, we know what that is. You just can't, Back to what that guy from Skunkworks said, they could do things back in the 1990s. I mean, the crash I'm dealing with, the UFO material I've got is 1980s. But in the 1990s, they could pretty much do anything. So, where does that leave us now?
So we've got things happening in the 1800s where people would see the airships.
Yeah, it could be. I think one of the conclusions that I have been able to draw, because it's nice to reach a conclusion of some kind at the end of it all, is the people that do know, let's call them the men in grey, people that do know, people that have actually got all the facts, and they know what's going on, they know what's capable of being done, they're the ones that are messing everything up on purpose. That's the ultimate conspiracy theory now for the 21st century. Why? Why are we dealing with so much nonsense? All the systems and the technologies and everything that we've known for so many years that works, from the Victorian times onwards, 200 years of stuff that clearly works. Why are they messing all of that up and coming up with things which are clearly not true? On purpose. It's got to be on purpose, because you can point at that gap, you can point at that piece of jigsaw puzzle and go, We know that they're there, and they're the ones pulling the strings. You know, what on earth's going on? So now you're right in there now. This won't get you deplatformed, but it's a nice way of saying, you know, conspiracy theories. You know, the internet's full of them. Tons of conspiracy theories. You know, I could keep pumping them out and nobody would ever let you broadcast this ever, you know, but that's the ultimate conspiracy theory. Whenever you see something going wrong, chaos is good for business. You know, what's going on? What's going on here? You know, question everything, believe nothing. That's been the mantra for the whole of, like, the 2020s so far. I think that's the mantra. Question everything, believe nothing, you know.
Definitely. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you again for coming in.
Thanks for having me. As always.
I know you enjoyed your sausage butty.
I did indeed enjoy the sausage butty. And as always, it's been a business doing pleasure with you.